Start with contracting sprites. Chapter 201, You're the most talented person I've seen in sword arts. In the morning, Su Hao practiced slashing at Instructor Wu's training field. The flaming spirit crow was practicing flapping its wings. The blade made swishing sounds as it cut through the air. Adjust your condition to its optimal state before slashing. You have to imagine that there's an enemy in front of you. What direction are you going to slash your sword from? Can you cut the enemy open with one slash? Instructor Wu's words touched the heart of the flaming spirit crow. Splitting, slashing, that requires an enemy, a target, for the cut to have texture. During this period, Instructor Wu demonstrated it a few times himself. His leaf blade warrior also performed a few rock slashes. Su Hao watched and took it in. He also understood all the various techniques and cultivation points of sword draw. Then, the interface appeared in front of his eyes. In the flaming spirit crow column, the cultivation method for sword draw had already been discounted. Secret Manual, Sword Draw, 5-9 intelligence points to unlock. It wasn't very expensive. Su Hao chose to unlock it. In an instant, countless information flowed into his mind. It was as if he had become a very proficient sword artist who had swung his sword tens of thousands of times. Wow! There was an inexplicable confidence. Su Hao's 5 fingers pressed together into the shape of a knife. He raised his hand and slashed down. He was like a cold swordsman. It hit the wooden pile at the side with a whoosh. Bang! The wooden pile shook. Su Hao froze for half a second. His left hand held onto his right hand and kept rubbing it. Steam came out of his mouth. It hurt so much. There were great feelings with this hand chop, as it carried an indomitable aura. So, it hurt like crazy. Su Hao rubbed his hands and glanced around from the corner of his eye. The others were all focused on practicing their sword techniques. No one noticed that he was being stupid. There wasn't much of a problem. His reputation as the star student was saved. Yes. He suddenly turned and looked at the flaming spirit crow who was learning wing slash. It happened to look over. Su Hao gave him a warning look. Flaming spirit crow tilted its head, not quite understanding. But suddenly, it felt a little cold. Am I, crow, not a fire element sprite? Squawk. It sank into deep thought. The next day, in the training field, Instructor Wu prepared a lot of wooden piles and looked at Su Hao and the other 2 students who were learning sword draw. Today, or rather in the future, your training mission is to split the wooden piles. When you can make the incision smooth and complete, you can step into the next stage. Of course, you're chopping ordinary wooden piles, while sprites are chopping ironwood piles. Apart from the flaming spirit crow, the other 2 sprites learning sword draw were Killer Mantis and Golden-Winged Sky Silkworm. Killer Mantis had a sword arm. The wings of the Golden-Winged Sky Silkworm were as sharp as blades. It turned into a golden stream of light and slashed through the ironwood pile. With a clang, the ironwood pile broke. But the cut was jagged and not flat. What you're doing is still an ordinary slash. You haven't touched the profound meaning of the sword. The flaming spirit crow also raised its wings. Slash! Half of the wooden pile was sent flying. The remaining half was charred black. The corners of Instructor Wu's eyes twitched slightly when he saw it. In terms of power alone, it was very strong. But if it can master the sword draw and concentrate all the attacks on one point, it will definitely be able to unleash several times the lethality. It's your turn now. The sprites are practicing, you can't relax either. Instructor Wu's 2 students nodded in agreement. Su Hao also held the knife and aimed it at the wooden pile in front of him. It waved. It slashed down at an angle of 45 degrees. Pata! A wooden pile fell to the ground. The incision was smooth and flat. It looked like it was slashed by a sprite with its unique skill. But Instructor Wu took a glance and couldn't move his eyes away. Why you've been practicing all of last night? He wanted to ask if he had learned it long ago. But thinking back to Su Hao's performance yesterday, him holding the sword and swinging the sword were both very clumsy and unfamiliar. It didn't seem like it. He also knew Su Hao as a student. Tianese province's top scholar, the one at the freshman challenge segment who completely wiped out the second-year students, led Whale Island University to win the Sprite Cultivator Cup, became a member of the special training camp in the first half of the semester, created several secret manuals on his own, and published heavyweight papers. So on and so forth. In just a short year or so, Su Hao had already achieved so many achievements that were enough to catch people's attention. How would he have the time to learn sword techniques? Could there really be such a monster who can learn everything at once? Slash again. Su Hao held the long sword and came to another wooden pile. He gestured. Ha! Here! Swish! The blade reflected silver light under the light. With a slash, the wooden pile broke. The sword went into its sheath. Perfect! Su Hao felt that he was already a mature machete man. Instructor Wu fell silent. His two students' eyes widened. One of them didn't quite believe it. He picked up the sword and went to the wooden pile. He exerted strength in his arm and swung the sword down. Crack! The long sword made a cut on the wooden pile, but it couldn't completely cut it. It was stuck. The recoil made him feel troubled. When he looked at Su Hao again, he seemed to be addicted to slashing. One slash to the left, one slash to the right. Slash, vertical slash, forward slash. The wooden piles were easily cut into two. Compared to yesterday, he had improved too much. What kind of tuition class did you go to? You are the person with the best talent in sword arts I've seen. I believe that you must have used all your rest time on practice to achieve such a significant improvement. That was. He, Su Hao, was able to have his current achievements because he worked hard step by step. For example, sword techniques. What he unlocked was a sword art that matched the flaming spirit crow. If it weren't for the fact that he used a few hours to hold the sword, swing the sword, and slash, would he be able to achieve what he did? If I unlock the profound meaning of one punch, the secret manual of fist techniques, then wouldn't I be able to? He thought about it. He couldn't either. Profound meanings and training methods were only directly transmitted into his mind, they couldn't directly change his physique and muscle memory. At most. It was to let Su Hao work 10 times harder when he was learning. It was good that he could protect himself. Learn sword techniques from me. You don't have to spend any credits. All the facilities here can be used by you. In the face of the invitation from Instructor Wu, Su Hao declined politely. He was just a student. He was also used to it. He had already concluded a set of methods to how to tactfully decline someone's good intentions. It was a pity for Instructor Wu. But he taught it more seriously. 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. Su Hao kept slashing, and the feeling of the sword became increasingly familiar. He finally understood why the flaming spirit crow liked to slash people so much. The moment the blade cut across the meat. Cough, the moment it cut across the wooden pile, it felt very refreshing. While he guided the flaming spirit crow in its cultivation, he didn't neglect other sprites either. He arranged for the dumb unicorn to train its dodging ability at the assessment venue. Thanks to Su Hao's identity as a member of the special training camp, he could use some facilities in the school that were not open to the public. He also arranged for the electric bear to absorb electricity in the thunder pool to increase its battery capacity. Of course, Su Hao had to accompany the flaming spirit crow, so he couldn't go to the various facilities to buy tickets himself. But what did that matter? Butterfly was already very mature. It knew how to buy tickets. It knew how to type on its cell phone. It could go anywhere with his student card. At the same time, it could also teach dumb unicorn some dodging skills. It could also teach the electric bear how to control its spiritual force with micromanipulation. Butterfly itself? Su Hao never worried. Developing the spiritual orb, researching the real illusion. It was fiddling on its own. When it had a direction, Su Hao then deduced a mature plan based on it. Quite a fee. The 5th day arrived. It was also Su Hao's last day at the training field. He was about to leave. He was a little reluctant. After all, the feel of the blade was too good when the wooden piles were struck. Before leaving, Instructor Wu said, "Lastly, I want to test the cultivation results of the flaming spirit crow. Sword draw can't be mastered in a few days. If you have any questions in the future, come and ask me." Chapter 202, Money-Earning Butterflies Business Classics. Behind the training field, in the rocky area. Let your flaming spirit crow slash out with all its might. I'll see what else is lacking. Instructor Wu said. Su Hao nodded and reached out to push the flaming spirit crow. It walked forward step by step and stopped in front of a large rock. It maintained a distance of 1 to 2 meters. It stood still. Its right wing rose. Feathers extended upwards and then suddenly straightened. It glowed with a metallic light. It looked like a red scimitar made of countless blades. On the blade, light shone brightly, and orange-red flames flowed on the blade like liquid. It was bright and eye-catching. Although it didn't transform into a small sun, the surrounding temperature also increased rapidly. The dazzling light made people couldn't help but squint their eyes. At this moment, the flaming spirit crow flapped its wings. The flaming blade was waved forcefully. A dazzling crimson sword beam slashed out. It cut through the huge rock and kept sweeping forward, leaving a cut more than 10 meters long on the ground. In the end, it hit another huge rock. Boom! The huge rock exploded with a boom, sending gravel flying and tumbling in all directions. At this moment, the huge rock in front of Flaming Spirit Crow still didn't collapse, but one could see with their eyes that a gap had been created in the middle of the huge rock. That was the manifestation of its skills. One blade fire crow. There was a long silence in the rocky area. The leaf blade warrior lowered its head and stared at the leaf blade on its arm, sinking into deep self-doubt. What exactly? Who was the coach? The leaf blade warrior was so tired on the inside that it wanted to take a break. Su Hao nodded slightly, expressing medium satisfaction. After all, he had taught it personally. Right, right. But there was still a very long way to go before the completion of the fire crow slash. He looked at Instructor Wu, wanting to hear what opinions and suggestions his instructor had. Instructor Wu felt his gaze and the corners of his mouth twitch slightly. What else could he teach? What should he teach? This couldn't be a flaming spirit crow that had been learning for 4.5 days. At the same time, Whale Island University, Thunder Pool. Whoosh! Whoosh! In the huge bowl-shaped arena, countless bluish-purple thunder arcs jumped. Thick and dark low-lying clouds were right above. Lightning flashed in the grayish-black clouds from time to time. Boom! A bolt of lightning fell and hit the needle-like object in the thunder pool. Countless thunder arcs spread from the tip to the bottom and then to the surroundings. Countless thunder arcs swam in the entire thunder pool. Even though dark clouds covered the sky, this place was still sparkling. At this moment, at a corner of the thunder pool, a white furry creature stood up and absorbed the surrounding electricity. It was enveloped by countless thunder arcs and let out a howl. The white hair on its body was also slightly charred by the lightning. But under the illumination of the thunder arc, the clusters of purple hair became brighter and brighter. Crack! Crack! After the electric bear absorbed countless electricity, the lightning imprints made of purple hair on its chest and arms burst forth with bluish-purple light. Its aura was also rising continuously. A moment later, it reached its peak. It broke through naturally. Howl! The electric bear raised its arms and roared. It fully displayed its LV2 thunder control ability. Countless bolts of electricity swarmed over, and the bluish-purple thunder arcs around it were swept clean. The thunder arcs in the other areas of the thunder pool also became much sparser. It shocked the few students nearby. After a long while, thunder rumbled and fell. The thunder-attracting machine absorbed the electricity and spread outwards. Only then did the thunder arcs start filling up the thunder pool again. Howl, howl, howl. After being domineering for a long while, the electric bear laid down again and ran to Butterfly with all four legs, looking like a bear asking for praise. Butterfly. No praising, I won't praise you, coo. Gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. It stared at the big fat bear. Using Sprite Trainer. Oh no, using Butterfly's stare. It made big fat bear make better use of its time to train. Otherwise, its control would become poor again after its strength increased sharply. When can it evolve into a charging bear, coo? When Electric Bear heard this, its bare face fell. It scratched its head. Hey! Outside the thunder pool, somewhere. It's too strong. It can absorb almost half of the electricity in the thunder pool area. Could it be a certain instructor's sprite? A student looked into the distance, his mouth agape. He then turned to look at his own sprite. A thundercloud lion, the evolved form of an electric master. Its body was about the size of an ordinary lion. Its tail was in the shape of lightning, and lightning flowed through the mane around its face. The thundercloud lion was using the environment of the thunder pool to learn the unique skill Thunderfall. But it never worked well. Its sprite trainer was very troubled. Seeing that the thunder streaks in front were all absorbed, he thought about it and brought the thundercloud lion along, walking forward. He walked in a corridor outside the thunder pool, so they would be unaffected by the thunder. Not long after, the boy saw the two sprites in front. An electric bear. The other one. Why is it a reverie butterfly? He was surprised that the wood element sprite would appear in the thunder pool, but also disappointed that he didn't see the figure of its instructor. He could only continue to command the thundercloud lion and train hard on the thunderfall. Sizzle! Sizzle! The thundercloud lion's electricity always exploded uncontrollably halfway. The boy scratched his head in distress. At this moment, he saw the reverie butterfly in the thunder pool flapping its wings and flying over. An invisible shield protected it, and everywhere it passed, thunder arcs parted to the sides. Reverie butterfly flew not far in front of him and called out. Gurgle! 10 minutes later. Gurgle! Roar, roar, roar! Howl, howl, howl! In the thunder pool, an electric bear sat there. A thundercloud lion squatted, its tail swaying. In front of them, Butterfly was demonstrating how to control spiritual force meticulously. Wood element and thunder element had their differences, but control was interlinked. The thundercloud lion nodded continuously, the thunder balls gathered on its mane actually showed significant progress. Not far away, the boy was stunned. As expected of the instructor's sprite, its teaching abilities are really strong. After teaching for a while, the boy saw that the reverie butterfly flew not far from him and produced a cell phone from somewhere. The cell phone flew to him and shook. The boy was initially a little startled, until he saw the words on the phone. Tutorial fee collection. Rightfully so. He had tasted the sweetness, and saw the improvement of the thundercloud lion. The boy didn't hesitate. How? You can't directly trade credits. As he spoke. Then, he saw the cell phone fly back, and in a few seconds, it flew in front of him again. Dragon Nation dollars transfer. At the same time, a card flew over. The boy picked it up and used the sprite commandeering wristband to scan the code on it. Suddenly, he was stunned. He saw. It was a student card. At the same time, Swordsman Su was walking back to the dormitory with a long sword gifted by the instructor. Suddenly, his wristband vibrated. Su Hao picked it up and took a look. Ding! Your account XXX has completed a transaction at 1713. Account amount plus 100,000. It was a text message. Su Hao sank into deep thought. Could it be that the school wristband will also receive fraud messages? Chapter 203, Completion of the Laboratory. At 7 in the evening, Butterfly brought Big Fat Bear back to the villa. Compared to its previous 867 working hours, it had already been delayed for an entire hour today. 1 hour. It was originally happy to earn money. It didn't know how long it would take to earn 100,000 yuan from writing novels. But the money was transferred to the wrong place. Gurgle. It wasn't until the sprite trainer of the Thunder Cloud Lion transferred the money and it didn't receive the message that Butterfly realized something was wrong. It gave the wrong card. That card was Su Hao's student card, but it had been using it these days. It was too used to using it. It thought that it was its own card and handed it over accidentally. When it realized, it was already too late. Butterfly sat on the head of the electric bear and sighed. As the second-generation heir of Bear King Mountain, the electric bear couldn't understand Big Sister's obsession with earning money. It's just 100,000 yuan, okay? Yes, 100,000 yuan. Gurgle. Butterfly's fighting spirit was reignited again. It had already found a new business. A momentary loss was nothing. Butterfly, come on. It cheered itself on. The electric bear pushed open the door and entered. In the villa, Su Hao was staring at his cell phone, and they did not know what he was doing. At this moment, Butterfly heard it. Strange, if it's not a scam message, why is there suddenly an additional 100,000 yuan? Butterfly. The weather was clear on January 20th. Su Hao was torturing Lu Ren for the 99th time. Electric bear, thunder whip. Lightning wrapped around the big fat bear's right paw as it stood upright. Countless thunderbolts weaved into a long whip. The thunder whip shot outwards, it weaved and spread continuously in the air. In a short time, it caught up to the flaming bat who was flapping its wings desperately. It rolled up. The flaming bat became an electric bat. It pulled the thunder whip back. The flaming bat, which was numb from the electricity, let out a miserable cry and was forcefully dragged down. A bear palm wrapped in countless lightning bolts enlarged in its eyes. The next moment, the bear paw landed right on it. Flaming bat died. Lu Ren, who had bet that he could last 10 seconds, failed again, as expected. At this moment, Su Hao's cell phone rang. He picked it up and swiped with his finger. Hello. Yes, yes. All right, I'll be there tomorrow. After Su Hao hung up, he saw Lu Ren approaching and asking. Why, there's a girl. No girls, but there's a laboratory. Su Hao said, I'll leave the electric bear here. If you have nothing to do, you can look for it to spar with you. I'll leave first. He waved his hand, leaving behind Lu Ren, who was hit and abused violently again, his back view dragging long. Su Hao set off from Whaleport town and took a special plane to the airport of Tianese province. Then, he took the high-speed rail back to the Familiaran city. He didn't bring any other sprites, only a butterfly. He planned to go home to visit his parents before work. Ding dong! Ding dong! Su Hao pressed the doorbell to the door in the sprite commandeering neighborhood. Before long, the door opened. To Su Hao's surprise, Father Su and Mother Su weren't the only ones at home. There were also relatives from Mother Su's side. Uncle, aunt, cousin. The two families didn't have much contact in the past. Su Hao only knew that his uncle's family was doing some business. He didn't know the details either. When they saw the star student return, his uncle and aunt immediately started chatting with his sprites about his identity at Whale Island University, singing all kinds of praises. But his uncles and aunts weren't sprite trainers, so their understanding of sprites were very limited. They didn't hit the nail on the head at all. The corners of Su Hao's mouth twitched. Butterfly was uncomfortable from the awkward praises. It acted cute and then flapped its wings and flew into the room. It hid in a corner. It took out its cell phone. Su Hao was left behind to continue facing them on his own. Su Hao was rendered speechless. As the center of the conversation, he had no choice but to accept it and continue sitting. They chatted about some of his experiences at Whale Island University. I heard that university students who graduated from prestigious schools can become deputy presidents of the Association of Sprite Trainers if they work in a small city like In City. Su Hao thought about it. Their abilities are about the same, but they still have to have management abilities. Among Whale Island University graduates, basically each of them had one sprite cultivated to the limit of elite level. Each had 2 to 3 elite levels. The team battle system was also basically formed. They had more than enough abilities to be a deputy president in an city. But ordinary people wouldn't choose this path. The deputy president of a city-level association basically was a retirement position. Most of them chose to work at the Association of Sprite Trainers because they were tired of fighting or because they felt that they didn't have anything to provide anymore. Graduates from prestigious schools had limitless prospects. Those who worked hard basically chose jobs related to the new world. Or they chose to be instructors at some sprite universities. There was no need for Su Hao to say all these. Wu Fan, haven't you always wanted to see your cousin? Now that you've seen him, if there's anything you don't understand, ask your cousin more. Aunt nudged a boy with glasses. Wu Fan was in his second year of high school this year. In the summer, they were also preparing to contract sprites and apply for the sprite stream. How, brother How, what kind of sprite do you think I should contract? First, we have to look at your budget. Su Hao said. His uncle waved his hand and said, no matter how poor he is, he can't be poor in education. I plan to spend 1,000,000 yuan to buy him a sprite. If he can buy a strong sprite, he will definitely have an advantage in the college entrance examination, right? If our Wu Fan can get into a prestigious school like you, even spending another 1,000,000 yuan would be worth it. Su Hao was rendered speechless. If 2,000,000 yuan could enroll one in a prestigious school, Lu Ren would definitely cry. It was himself. With talent and hard work, the money spent on a few sprites before the college entrance examination was worth more than 20,000,000 yuan. Even if he didn't count the heart of attributes, he still had to have a few million. He coughed. Little stone elephant, little seashell, blue water frog, vine snake. These are sprites with pretty good potential. But whether it's strong or not depends on Wu Fan and his sprite's hard work. After he contracts a sprite, you can ask me if there's anything you don't understand. Recently? I've been a little busy recently. I have to go to Yunhua City tomorrow. Wait a minute, I have the learning materials from my past high school days on my computer. Su Hao took out a thumb drive, inserted it into the laptop, and copied 10 GS of learning materials inside. Then, he patted his cousin Wu Fan's shoulder and said, there's only half a year left until you contract a sprite. It's best if you finish reading these information within half a year. It'll help you plan the development direction of your sprite in the future. His cousin, Wu Fan, was stunned. The next day, after Su Hao and Butterfly finished the breakfast specially made by Mother Su, they took a taxi to Huayang County, where the laboratory was. Seeing the estimated cost of more than 100 yuan on the app, Su Hao's heart didn't waver at all. He even felt that it was too cheap. The life of the rich was just so dull. We've arrived at our destination. What is this place? The building looks pretty grand. The driver muttered a few words. Seeing that there were quite a lot of strong-looking sprites there, he retracted his gaze. Currently, one couldn't be too curious, especially in their line of work. Su Hao got out of the car and walked forward. The location of the laboratory was far away from residential areas, commercial areas, industrial areas. To put it bluntly, it was built in a remote location. The land was cheap. The laboratory didn't need to be built in a bustling area either. Silence and safety were the most important things. Su Hao came to the gate and was stopped by the sprite trainer guarding the gate. "Who are you looking for?" Chapter 204, Time to recruit an assistant. Outside the laboratory building, at the gate, a sprite trainer stood guard here with a mountain-moving ape. He reached out and stopped Su Hao. "This is a private laboratory. You can't enter without permission from the owner." He saw the sprite trainer in front of him looking at him with a wary gaze. Without saying a word, he picked up his cell phone and made a call. "Brother Lu, I'm at the entrance of the laboratory." Lupin was the person in charge of supervising the construction of the laboratory that Master Yao had introduced to him. During the construction of the laboratory, Su Hao and Lupin usually contacted each other over the phone. They weren't strangers. Not long after he hung up, Lupin emerged from the lab building in a suit and greeted him warmly. "Brother Su, you're finally here. Come with me, I'll introduce you to the various areas of the laboratory." The two of them walked in. The sprite trainer guarding the door was confused for a while, before he turned around a little stiffly, looked at another person, and asked. That person's surname was Su. Could he be the owner of the laboratory? What the F***ck? I heard that only high-level sprite cultivators can build private laboratories. He. Could it be that he was born with a child's face? The main body of the laboratory was a 5-story building, not considered big. However, the building was silver in color. The neatly arranged glass windows reflected the sunlight. Outside the building, there was another 3-meter-high wall surrounding it. It still looked very lavish. Lupin told him, the first floor is the testing area, with large facilities such as the unique power test machine, speed track, and so on that need to be stabilized on the ground. There are reception areas and lounges on the second floor. The reception areas are mainly used to receive clients. For example, you've developed a certain product. If you want to sell it, you need to contact some relevant companies. I don't need to say anything about the lounge area. Although it's not big, there are basically all kinds of alcohol and billiards there. The third floor is the dormitory and office area. The last 4 and 5 floors are where the experiment area is. The elevator doors opened on both sides, and Su Hao arrived at the 5th floor. The corridor of the whole floor was on the outside, in a back shape, wrapping the laboratory inside. Fingerprints, irises, passwords, and other unlocking methods are used here. They haven't been activated yet. I'll tell you in detail after the tour is over. Su Hao walked around. He had to admit that it was awesome. Compared to his previous consultation office, the Sprite Care House in An City had a similar scale, but the facilities were more complete and advanced. Its level was countless streets above the Sprite Care House. Many experiments that he only knew the theory of, the ideas in his mind, and a bit of inspiration that came out of his brain from time to time could be realized here. Such an awesome laboratory would be his in the future. So he's really awesome. It took Su Hao dozens of minutes to go from the 5th floor to the 1st floor. He stopped, took a closer look, and listened to Lupin introduce the various equipment. There were a lot of equipment, their activation, maintenance, and things to take note of. Even if there was an instruction manual, he had to get to the bottom of it. He also instructed Butterfly to listen carefully together. After all, it was all money. He might have heard wrongly or forgotten. But Butterfly wouldn't. Bringing along research assistant Butterfly was indeed a wise decision. After coming out of the laboratory building, Su Hao and Lupin walked towards the back. Apart from the main building, the whole laboratory is a sprite cultivation area. Compared to the laboratory building, the sprite cultivation area occupied a larger area. It was more than 10 mu, the size of a football field. There were large amounts of bamboo forests in the cultivation area. There was a small mound, and a lake under the mound. Outside, hard and thick walls surrounded them. The walls were 4 meters tall, and there was an electric net above them. It was almost a miniaturized free-ranging center. It's hard to imagine that these were all built within 2 months. Su Hao exclaimed. Lupin smiled and said, in this era, whether it's digging the ground or transplanting trees, everything has become very easy with the help of sprites. The earth and wood construction team is no joke. Besides, the small laboratory has a detailed set of design standards in Dragon Nation. We can just build it according to the blueprint. He pointed at the cultivation area in front of him. In a few days, that batch of wood mantis will be shipped over. By then, you'll be busy. It's best to recruit 1 or 2 students and a few ordinary employees. Students. You have to know that you're already a high-level sprite cultivator. It's very normal for you to take in disciples at this level. Those who are capable come first, he said. There's no need to be very formal. As long as you write high-level sprite cultivator points in the recruitment conditions, believe it or not, even if they don't get paid, there will still be many sprite cultivators who would submit their resumes. So that was it. Su Hao felt that it made sense. He had still underestimated how awesome he was. Lupin added, apart from employees, labs have to be guarded. Although your lab hasn't been activated and there's no research, the equipment in the building alone is worth a lot of money. Ordinary security guards aren't up to the task of guarding the laboratory. Sprite trainers are needed, preferably elite level ones. Right now, the sprite trainers guarding outside are from the construction team. I can only let them stay for 5 more days. You have to settle the situation here before leaving. Su Hao was very busy. He was busy comparing instructions and familiarizing himself with various instruments and equipment. It's too difficult. On the first day he owned his own laboratory, Su Hao was stumped. He had passed the sprite cultivator assessment. Sprite cultivation was easy. It was also a piece of cake for him to win the championship of the Sprite Cultivator Cup and shock all the masters. But it was stumped by the devices. How do I use this? Gosh! Is the manual for humans to read? He searched for butterfly. After not finding it, he sighed again. It's just a baby less than 2 years old, how can it possibly use these complex devices? Indeed. I still have to hire a sprite cultivator assistant as soon as possible. It wasn't difficult to reason with these devices and equipment. Sprite cultivators from sprite universities usually knew how to use them. But Su Hao didn't go to the sprite cultivation specialization. Even if he majored in sprite cultivation after the end of the Sprite Cultivator Cup, it was basically just a title. He didn't attend classes. Master Yao and the others obviously didn't think that he, Su Hao, an 18-year-old high-level sprite cultivator, the founder of spirit power techniques, didn't know how to use those ordinary devices? Isn't that implausible? Su Hao was a man of his words. Since he didn't know how to use it, then, he did not. He decisively released the recruitment advertisement. Ordinary employees don't need to be paid very high salaries, so do sprite cultivators. After all, we are providing the best treatment conditions. After Su Hao listed a few requests, he released hiring information on the relevant platforms. He waited patiently. When everyone was ready, he could officially start work. The initial goal was to earn 200 million yuan. He would earn back the capital first. On the 3rd day after taking over the laboratory, the 10 wood mantis sponsored by Master Lu were delivered. They were reared in the cultivation area. With Butterfly looking after them, they were fed some jade powder every day, then released some pressure to force the wood mantis to train, to prevent them from becoming fat one by one. Thanks to my assistant, Butterfly, I am able to free up my hands to handle the recruitment. On the 5th day, the sprite trainers guarding the door also left. The whole laboratory became empty. He was alone. He urgently needed manpower to fill in the positions. He opened the website of the platform and found the column submitted by official sprite cultivators. Suddenly, he felt a little expectant and nervous. It was like the anticipation of facing an unknown card before 10 consecutive draws. After a pause, Su Hao opened the column and saw. There are actually 36 elementary level sprite cultivators. Chapter 205, The Chief Tool Person, is you. He, Su Hao, was an unknown high-level sprite cultivator. With a new and fruitless laboratory. In just a few days, 36 elementary level sprite cultivators had submitted their resumes. He could only say. The platform was awesome. His high-level certificate and laboratory were all certified by the platform, and they were very attractive to newbie sprite cultivators. Let me see who submitted their resumes. Su Hao browsed through them one by one. Lin XX, a fresh graduate of Tianese University. He got a sprite cultivator license in his 3rd year of university. His specialty was, having no specialties. Chen XX, a 4th year student at Eastwood University. During his 1st year of university, he passed the entry-level sprite cultivator assessment. He was once the president of the Student Union of Eastwood University and received multiple awards. Su Hao looked at the XX competition 1st prize, 2nd prize, and so on and fell into deep thought. I've never won an award before, no. I've never heard of these competitions, bad reviews. He then looked at the 3rd person. Wang XX, a 4th year student at Star Sky University. His specialty was, money. He was a rich 2nd-generation heir. Drop it, next one. To me, abilities aren't the most important. Those who want to come to my laboratory to get rich are even less so. What Su Hao wanted was just a tool that wouldn't gain emotions. One who could meticulously complete his arranged missions. Strong ability? Perhaps he would have a lot of opinions too. No. Gilded? It was very likely that he would jump ship in the future. That wouldn't do either. What he wanted was someone who wasn't talented but was serious in doing things and could keep secrets. Anyone with an impressive background will be rejected. Those with too many opinions, or even those who are restless, will be rejected. Those who think they're awesome have to be rejected. If your grades are poor, you will have to be rejected too. Otherwise, what if you can't even use the devices? Su Hao kept selecting. In the end, there were only 5 people left. Xie Tianhe, Yu Jingzhu, Zheng Kongcheng, Ru Qianqian, and Kong Yun. All 5 of them were 4th year students or fresh graduates. After Su Hao confirmed, he sent them an email informing them to go to location address for the interview tomorrow morning. The next day, at 8 a.m. a black car stopped at the entrance of the laboratory. Xie Tianhe got out of the car in a white shirt and black trousers. At this moment, 2 sprite trainers were guarding the security pavilion by the gate. High-level sprite trainers. They were temporary workers Su Hao hired from Yunhua City's Association of Sprite Trainers. They acted as a front. Xie Tianhe followed one of them to the reception room on the 2nd floor of the laboratory building. He came the earliest and only saw a young man in a white coat. He thought that he must be someone from the laboratory. He immediately greeted, "Hello, senior." Even though Xie Tianhe felt that the young man in front of him was very likely a university student, and was younger than him. But the other party was most likely the official student of that high-level sprite cultivator. Calling him senior and leaving a good impression might be the key to him standing out from the competition. That senior greeted him, but his expression was a little strange. Xie Tianhe didn't think too much about it. After seeing the senior leave, he sat down and waited patiently. Before long, the other interviewers arrived one after another. Xie Tianhe observed. Apart from him, there were a total of 4 people. The 3 girls and 1 boy were about the same age. The boy sitting not far from him looked short and thin. He sat there with his head lowered, not saying a word. Among the girls, one of them was wearing glasses. The little lotus leaf she contracted was still not entry-level, and from the looks of it, it seemed to lack confidence. He crossed her off the list of strong competitors. Only the other 2 girls. One was dressed maturely and was actually wearing a low-cut dress. He couldn't look any more. The other person was dressed professionally like him. The contracted sprite was Atar Mori, and she even brought a laptop. She gave off the feeling that she was professional. The latter 2 were strong opponents. After all, that high-level sprite cultivator could at most recruit 1 to 2 people. He compared them to himself. At the same time, he was also wondering how the owner of the laboratory would test them. Ask questions, or something else. Thud. In the reception room, it was exactly 9 a.m. sharp. The young man in the white coat appeared again. He was the first to stand up. He opened his mouth and was just about to greet his senior to deepen his impression when he heard. "I'm the owner of the laboratory and also the publisher of the recruitment notice. My surname is Su. Now, follow me." He's senior, were stuck in his throat. His gaze gradually became F***ck. He's teacher SS. Su. They knew that the laboratory belonged to a high-level sprite cultivator named Su Hao. But no one told them that teacher Su was so young. Perhaps teacher Su looked young, but his real age was at most 30. A high-level sprite cultivator at the age of 30. He had a bright future. Many thoughts emerged in their minds, but they were only surprised for a moment before quickly following up. "Yeah, it's all right, I'm not surprised." Su Hao connected his cell phone to the surveillance cameras of the laboratory building. When he saw the performance of the 5 candidates, he nodded slightly. Patient, quiet, curious, and not questioning. It was his basic requirement. The 5 selected people were barely qualified tools. Which tool was better, then? He walked up the stairs to the 4th floor, turned around, and looked at the 5 people in front of him. "My test is very simple. Assist my sprite in completing an experiment to collect data from the wood mantis. Whoever can, will stay. To assist the teacher in completing the experiment." The assessment project wasn't out of His expectations, and the reactions of the others were similar. They were all experienced, not laboratory newcomers. But suddenly, one of them was stunned, and the other 2 were stunned. They discovered something wrong. What teacher Su said just now was, "Assist my sprite, not assist me." Applicant number 1. Applicant number 2. Applicant number 5. Their gazes moved and saw the sprite, on top of teacher Su's head. It was a reverie butterfly. Gurgle. That reverie butterfly called and waved at them. He was stunned for a moment before he understood. He understood. He understood everything. Helping a high-level sprite cultivator to complete the experiment was too simple and ordinary. Without any difficulty, how could they showcase their respective abilities? Assisting a sprite to complete the experiment was the difficulty of the test. No wonder teacher Su could get a high-level title at such a young age. His way of thinking was indeed different from ordinary sprite cultivators like them. He secretly sized up the others, feeling that none of his competitors noticed teacher Su's intentions. Their comprehension abilities were too poor. It looked like he was going to win. After watching the applicants enter the laboratory, Su Hao stood outside the door for a few seconds, then went straight to the monitoring room. He only looked at it in the surveillance footage, not from the scene. Why? Because he wasn't familiar with the equipment. That was why he got Butterfly to host the experiment. Anyway, the little rascal has always wanted to try the feeling of doing research. I'll give this opportunity to it. In the laboratory, the candidates looked at one another. They didn't know where to start. At this moment, they saw that Reverie Butterfly pressed a switch. The next moment, on the left side of the laboratory, the alloy wall suddenly opened on both sides. Dark green sprites were hitting the floor and the wall with tinkling sounds. It was wood mantises, 10 of them. They were all wild. Wild sprites weren't very obedient. Was it really okay for them to appear directly in the laboratory without anesthesia? What if the devices were damaged? They thought to themselves, and told their sprites to watch closely again. The next moment, gurgle! That Reverie Butterfly called out. They saw that the wild and less obedient wood mantis actually sat upright one by one, and even lined up quickly. One of them twisted in the wrong direction, its butt facing the door. It was knocked by the arm of another wood mantis, and pulled back. The candidates were stunned. Gurgle! That Reverie Butterfly turned around and shouted at them. Just as Xietianhe and the other candidates were perplexed, their sprites called out. Howl! Chirp, chirp! Woo! Their sprites translated for them, telling them to quickly get on the devices and experiment on the wood mantises. So, this was what the interview requirement meant by bringing along one's sprites. The wood mantises stood in a row forward. The interviewers began to measure data and collect samples with devices. And summarize them for the one leading the experiment. Reverie Butterfly. They only used dozens of minutes to complete the full physical examination of the 10 wood mantises. Their cooperation was pretty good. It was very efficient. As expected of high-level sprite cultivators, the experiment idea was so clear. Clear! Clear! Xietianhe suddenly remembered that Butterfly, which was using its psychic power to control the equipments, was just a sprite. A sprite could actually host an experiment. Teacher Su was indeed a high-level sprite cultivator at such a young age. In order to learn from the young and promising Teacher Su, he had to apply successfully. At the same time, in the control room, Su Hao was observing the performance of the candidates through the surveillance cameras in the laboratory. 2 men and 3 women. There was no problem with the basics. Su Hao focused on observing their performance in other aspects. For example, several people cast their gazes at Butterfly from time to time, their expressions either curious or shocked. Number 1 glanced at it 3 times. Number 2 has peeked 5 times. No 3. Number 5 is the most focused, or the least curious, and has been working hard. Number 3 is an inconspicuous girl, and number 5 is an inconspicuous man. Su Hao observed the 2 of them for a while and was rather satisfied. Serious, but not outstanding. It was his ideal tool model. He thought about it and pulled up their information. Kong Yun came from a poor family. In the beginning, she didn't get into a Sprite university, but only got into an ordinary specialization at Tianese University. Later on, she got the opportunity to transfer her Sprite cultivator license from self-study to the Sprite cultivator specialization. Zheng Kongcheng came from an ordinary family, but he was luckier. He passed the written test for a Sprite cultivator license during high school. Later on, he successfully got into a Sprite university. The 2 of them. One was a short and thin boy. The other was a girl wearing glasses. Her looks were only ordinary. Su Hao observed for a while and made a decision. You.